Hi everybody, welcome in. I'm going to be doing a series. I'm going to try to do them weekly. We'll see what I end up feeling. I want to take comments from the week that maybe I didn't reply to, or maybe I had too long of an answer to reply to in just one comment, and do one dedicated video in the week. I also want to reserve this segment in case there's questions. Maybe people ask an opinion on something that would be easier if I explain it rather than, type it up in a comment. I think maybe this style of video could lend itself to just one comment will equal out an entire video format. These might just be simple question answers that maybe I just discuss, but this will be the first one and we're gonna see how it goes. I took a few comments from the week. This first comment happened seconds before I turn on my camera, as you'll see on the timestamp. I normally don't bring attention to these types of comments. I usually just downvote it so it goes farther down into the chat. I get these types of comments enough saying that I'm overanalyzing the show. I'm gonna address this one time and then I'm gonna follow my normal rubric where I downvote these comments. Anytime I get comments of people saying that I'm overanalyzing Drag Race, it's typically coming from a place of people who don't want to think about the production side. For a kind of sloppy, trite, contrived, boring comparison, it's like Aussians who are fine living in the Emerald City with their green glasses, knowing that the city is not in fact emerald, that they are seeing things through a colored lens, and are fine living in this farcical world because they're happy. They don't want to think that anything is different than what they've already been told. They don't want to believe that the wizard is just some dude behind a curtain. They want to believe that all of this play acting is reality. That's what I find typically comes from these comments, and I've been creating enough Drag Race videos for enough years that I have seen the ins and outs of the types of people that leave these comments. It's comical to me that people still in 2025 don't want to recognize that Drag Race is a TV show first and in competition second. So whenever people say, oh, you're overanalyzing, I already know that it's coming from someone who just doesn't want to think about it. To which I say, don't go and watch an opinion video on YouTube. Just talk to your friends who share the same thing and talk about how much you love the show. Policing somebody else on how they should respond to the show is tacky, and that's the only time I'm gonna bring this up. So this comment is in reference to editing style. Will there be more pleasurable experience if the show's editor, writer, whatnot do per episode storyline and not necessarily following a specific queen storyline that may or may not have been produced? I only ask this because sometimes it takes out of the pleasure personally for me as a viewer when I can see obvious produced plots when supposedly a reality show should have been organic on events and stuff that happened during the show. So there's actually a lot of different parts to this question that I'm gonna try and condense down as concisely as possible. Drag Race and other reality shows film for like 48 hours for one singular episode. So they look at that at the end of all of this, TV producing, goes through and says, all right, our players are these characters. This one in the competition goes home early. This one goes home really late. What is the storyline that helped get them to the end besides them just being good at the competition? Because we want to showcase our obvious winner, the person that we like. We want to showcase them doing well. So we're going to take their best moments and highlight those and remove the parts where they look maybe sloppier. If we're trying to give them the underdog edit, we will show them more of these moments where they're doing poorly and then really highlight when it's a win and it's a knockout of the park. So in a competition series, what they'll do is, they'll show someone stumbling and failing in the rehearsal process, but then the judges give them this banger critique among, 25 minutes of critique, but they'll only take that one 30-second clip that tells them, you're doing so good, you really surprised us. They include that in the edit, and then we as the audience go, yes, they were better than their bad moment. They got that good critique that they needed. If someone does something that is a little malicious in the course of 48 hours, they're going to highlight that portion. Like, think of your day-to-day and the things that you do. If someone were to record you, they could really make whatever edit they wanted. If you have an emotional breakdown right before you go to work, but then you do a banger job and you make some customer's day. If you were to take that part where you have the breakdown and the part where you have this great moment with a customer, that looks like you had a win that day in the course of like filming, right? But if you were to take that breakdown and then show you also having a breakdown at work, you then appear like you're unstable, like you just can't deal with the day, you're too stressed. Reality TV show takes these moments in time, like literally a snapshot, and tries to apply that to the show to create a story. Sometimes that's heavy-handed, and sometimes that's adeptly done. In a show like Drag Race, which claims to be unscripted, as most reality shows claim to be, they don't go into the season necessarily with an idea of who's going to play what. They just kind of let it all happen and then sort of meddle in between. And that happens a lot, I think, more in the mainline series, where in All Stars, they already know, we want this person to get a redemptive moment. So we are going to give them a country girl group challenge when they failed in a country girl group challenge in their original season, and then we're gonna show them knocking it out of the park and winning. We know that they love The Wizard of Oz, so we're going to give them a Wizard of Oz challenge and let them succeed. There are these slight moments of production. Those are obnoxious. Sometimes when these stories happen where people are feuding and having little tension moments, that is organic. But the way that the show highlights it in a kind of clunky way makes us as an audience, at least the perceptive ones, look and say, these two characters are finalists, and it's very clear what the story is going to be as it progresses because they keep showing us these two having this friction that's gotta resolve into something. Great examples, Coco and Alyssa, Silhouette and Marina, Sister and Ahura. You know, they just give us these little elements that are maybe sloppily produced, but when you're recording for 48 hours and you're trying to condense that down to an hour, it's kind of hard to choose what you want to do. All this answer to say, it's really difficult to say specifically what the producers should be doing on how to manage the show better. I think what would drastically help the overall pleasure of the viewing experience of Drag Race would be just let the show play out and manage it as if it were a regular season where you don't know who the main players are going to be. You don't know who the front runners are going to be. You just kind of let it happen as it does and then edit the show around how it all panned out. Where what I think happens in the All-Stars or All-Stars adjacent, such as Versus the World, they already go in knowing we want this character to have a redemptive moment. We want this queen to go home here. We want this queen to really succeed in this area. So we're going to push critiques that don't really make sense so that she gets that win. I would love a universe where the girls can just talk and the edit can just show us their high moments. Cause like, look at something like Boulet Brothers' Dragula. If you haven't seen it, they avoid drama. If it happens with the ghouls, they'll show it in the final edit if it's kind of unavoidable and it was something that was just way too big. But otherwise, they kind of just show us the ghouls competing and doing really good. I think Drag Race could focus on that. King of Drag did that very recently in their first season. They just show us these competitors competing and doing really well. They only show us their low moments when it's super applicable to how it all plays out on the main stage. Like Percocets struggling really hard to connect with certain challenges. Dick Von Dyke struggling really hard in the finale. Otherwise, you know, show us just them doing well. Show us them being great. And I think that would lend to a much better TV show, at least if they want to tout that it's a competition show. But it's not. Next one, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the new dubbed version of the international seasons. Mama, these are crunchy, ugly, knockoff boots. I freaking hate the AI dubbing. I tried giving a chance to France. It speeds through. There's no spacing between any of the conversations. The AI sounds weird. And I think that this has bled into translation because I think they're relying too hard on the AI to translate the show rather than having an actual editor who's sitting down listening, translating as it goes. Because there's moments in even the subtitles now that are just missing. And I can only assume that's because the AI either can't understand or doesn't know how to translate a phrase. So it just omits it from the final edit. I think it is such a chop. It is miserable that WoW is relying on this rather than having an actual human being sit down and just dub. Like, just get a couple of voice actors. Can't be that expensive for all the money they're making. Get I don't know, 8 or 9 voice actors to come in and just do every international season. They used to do that with Iron Chef. They just had the same like 8 or 9 voice actors on retainer who would translate the Japanese version of the show for US audiences. And you'd be like, oh, that's girl number 2 who does literally all of the newscaster and pop star guest judges. Oh, that's voice actor male number 3 who always does the mean judge. I think that would be a lot better than whatever the hell they're doing right now. I think it is awful, and I need them to stop. This next one is regarding Malaysian Royale. The problem is with casting. They stack the Filipino side with strong queens, while the international queens are mostly first outs. There was no chance for the international queens, and so inevitably, as international queen will go home each week, thus making it as if this season is really about crowning a Filipino girl. There are a lot of people saying this exact sentiment, and then there's an equal amount of people saying, oh, well, if you say that they're early outs, that's just discounting them, saying that they weren't able to compete. Pause, 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 pause. If your immediate reaction is to say, well, you're just discounting their talent. Hold up. Because what happens next is they always go, well, Kylie won and she was out early. They love to bring up Vanjie going out first and then making it to the end. Like these one-off instances where they completely ignore the Mimi I'm first, the Morgans, Gia, Farrah, Jasmine, Blair, India, Mayhem, Mariah, Angina, Serena, Scarlett, Monica, Naisha, MKD, Phoenix, Nicole, Alyssa Hunter, Cynthia Lee Fontaine. And that's not even talking about the Versus the World series, where there's even more like La Kahena and Gothy Kendall. These queens were early outs for a reason. They're really good at drag, but they're not very good at drag race. There's completely different universes that these two panels exist on, and sometimes they meet in the middle. These queens don't have the improv or the acting or the sewing or the design or the styling props to last against people who are significantly stronger than them. And a lot of people in Malaysian Royale have been saying, oh, well, Venus and Brigading were not finalists. No, but they could have been. If you go back and watch Philippines 1, Brigading could have been top 4. Venus could have been top 4, but the judges got really bored of her out of nowhere. Silhouette and Marina had so much storyline, they were locked into the finale, even if Silhouette probably could have gone home 3 different times. Precious Paula Nicole was just on like a Spanky Jackson level of different from everybody else that there was no way that she was gonna go home. And even though Eva La Queen may have been the weakest performer out of that whole group, her fashion and styling was the strongest. She had some of the best acting and improv chops of everyone in that group. And she had a great character. Her drag persona and her poise and professionalism was just way too strong to ignore that season. Not to say that Brigading and Venus were not poised and professional and had good fashion, because they had all those things. These other contestants just had more of it. That's fact. So this season of Malaysian Royale, the decks are stacked against these early out queens who didn't make it farther in their season because they aren't very good at the show. And we saw that here. There are these girls that come on that have very good looks, that have interesting enough mugs, but then when it comes to the camera, they recoil, they shrink, they are unable to connect. And a big part of making TV and making reality TV competitions, you have to connect beyond the stage, go through that camera and to the audience, and punch up whatever you're doing to attend. And some of these girls get on this show and are like Pearl and Shakespeare. Hark, who goes there? They're not giving anything, mama. Next is from one of the polls that I did, I believe. Honestly, I prefer the way Canada's Drag Race do their Lollapalooza and US season 16 and 17, where the winners advance each round until there's one left. For me personally, I think Canada's Drag Race season 4, where it was the strongest lip syncers went to the end and then chose someone to be safe from the bottom, was one of the gaggiest twists, I think, probably of all time. And then we got the bottoms lip sync against each other one last time before someone went home. That was so good. I think every single season should rip a page right out of Canada's Drag Race playbook, that episode specifically, and incorporate that into every season, and we would have such a banger universe where the strongest of the competitors go to the end and then have to make a social game decision to save someone from the bottom. And then those bottoms can actually fight for their life. I think it creates a moment of sympathy where maybe the top players recognize this competitor is a little bit weaker, but they've got other cool areas that we want to see. We don't want them to get sniped out just yet. Let's give them one last chance to try and fight for themselves next week, rather than get bulldozed by stronger competitors. Plus, if we put the two strongest competitors in the bottom, one of them will go home. Or, you know, it's an opportunity to snipe out somebody that you really don't like. Leave someone weak in the bottom, and then one of the stronger players can just take them out and end their suffering. There's a lot of ways that you could play that game, and we as the audience get to enjoy that moment unfolding out. I think that would be really sickening. And then last one for today. I hated season 11 so much when it was current that I almost quit watching the series entirely. Finally went back and rewatched it recently, and it's still my least favorite season. I love Evie and some of the queens, obviously, but going through that season is a slog to me. I understand this criticism, and I've heard it a lot of times. Season 11 is a little bit of a rough watch, and I did a video recently on this, talking specifically about the edit, if you want to go check it out. I think the biggest problem with season 11 in particular is that it's very clear that whatever they were doing on the ground production-wise that they wanted to unfold as the competition went on, as in they, at the first couple episodes, saw who they liked and wanted to try and push them. There's a very clear moment in the competition where they stop vibing with some of those players, like Nina and Plastique and Vanjie, and decide that they are the object of obsession of dislike. That the players that they didn't seem to connect with much in the beginning, like Evie and Akira, suddenly get a huge scoot to the front. It's very much that meme of I don't want to play with you anymore. Silky goes from being someone who is really enjoyed for her charisma to now annoying the judges as well with her charisma. And the edit struggles to morph with that story. The editors can't quite figure out how to sculpt the end narrative, the thing that we're supposed to see as an audience, where these players are the front runners and these players are going to the end. These are the ones with storyline, because even the judges can't figure that out on the ground, what they like. So the edit struggles to keep up. And there's this huge dissonance between the first half of the season and the second half of the season. And I think that ultimately is season 11's biggest problem, and continues to be the problem for many other seasons where similar things happen. They're vibing with one group, and then they stop out of nowhere. We kind of saw that happen with Irene and Aja and Bosco in season 10 of All Stars, where that orange group was so good, and then when they all merged together, they were background noise to Ginger and Mistress, sadly. But I understand why people don't like season 11. I think that is totally valid. Thank you all for your comments throughout the last week. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I would love to try and keep doing this. If y'all have questions that you ask in the comments, I'm gonna maybe try and reserve them for these weekend videos. We'll see if I end up vibing with this and want to keep doing it. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all on the flip.